Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents How Not to Hate a Duke by Jennifer Haymore, narrated by Sasha Higgins. Chapter 1. Georgiana hid a yawn behind her gloved hand. She shouldn't be so bored. She should be gazing adoringly at the young man who'd approached her and her mother during their walk in the park, and who was now gushing effusively about the lovely weather. But it had been a long season. She was exhausted. Thank God it would soon be over. Georgiana twisted a smile onto her face as the gentleman turned to her, beaming. What was his name? Mr. Wolsey, maybe? She truly couldn't remember. The many faces of the bachelors who'd expressed interest in her this season had begun to merge together into one fortune-hunting facade. They were all the same. She continued to parade through the marriage mart year after year in the hopes that one day she might find someone different. But it was hopeless. When it came to Georgiana Milford, the only thing men were interested in was her inheritance. Not one of the potential husbands she'd met had ever tried to pry beneath the glittering surface of the richest heiress in England. "What do you think, Miss Milford?" Mr. Maybe Wolsey asked. Oh dear, she hadn't been listening. She turned to her mother. "What do you think, Mamma?" she asked, cranking her smile up another 10 degrees. Maybe she'd never find someone to spend her life with. Honestly, that would be far better than giving away her inheritance to someone who would thrust her aside once he had his hands on her fortune. "I don't believe it will rain again, Mr. Webley," her mother said. "That spot of rain this morning was exactly what we all needed, but I dare say those clouds will just blow past, and our day will continue to be exquisite." Oh, right. Webley. That was his name. Regret flushed through Georgiana. It wasn't his fault she hadn't remembered. But the way he looked at her, she knew that greedy expression. She'd seen it too many times not to be able to decipher it. He was exactly like the rest of them. "I do hope you're correct, Mrs. Milford." "Oh, Eliza, is that you?" someone called in a high-pitched sing-song voice. Georgiana looked past Mr. Webley to see a knot of older ladies huddled farther down the path. One of them was waving at them, gesturing at Georgiana's mother. Thankfully, that was Webley's cue to go. He bowed to them both, wished them a good afternoon, and took his leave. As he strode off, Mamma murmured, "Well, what did you think?" Georgiana gave a careless shrug. "Oh, Gigi," her mother sighed. "I think he was lovely. Very kind and attentive, and handsome to boot." "Was he?" Georgiana frowned. "I didn't notice." As they approached her mother's friends, Georgiana craned her neck, trying to catch a glimpse of Wolsey Webley to confirm his handsomeness, but he had turned the bend in the path. Instead, her gaze snagged with another man's. This man was definitely handsome. He walked alone, just coming round the bend toward them. His form was tall and dark, but his ocean-blue eyes pierced straight through her from a distance. Not Wolsey Webley. Someone different, far more potent, far more despicable. Georgiana yanked her gaze away. The Duke of Desborough was walking toward them on the footpath at Hyde Park. Good God, if her mother saw him... She realised her heart was pounding, and she had stopped breathing. For heaven's sake, what an absurd reaction to the man known far and wide as the Duke of Despots, a title, along with his legal one, he'd inherited from his despotic father. By all accounts, he had followed in the old Duke's footsteps. Tyrannical to his employees and tenants, demeaning and dismissive of women and whoever else he considered beneath him, careless of and destructive to the vast lands under his control, and her father's sworn enemy. She risked another glance at him. He'd swivelled away and was rounding the bend again in the opposite direction. The man was avoiding them. She pulled in a relieved breath, but then straightened her shoulders and pasted on a smile. That man didn't deserve any type of response from her, not beyond disgust anyway. She stepped up to the ladies, who started quizzing her mother about her hat. Mamma raised her fingers to stroke one of the peacock feathers. "Isn't it lovely? Georgiana designed it." Hands pressed on Georgiana's shoulders. "Boo!" She jumped a foot into the air and spun around, palm to chest, to see her dear friend Charlotte, a broad smile on her pretty face. "Charlotte," she gasped, "you scared me." "Sorry." Charlotte took Georgiana's hand in her own and squeezed tightly. "It's just that I'm so happy to see you." "Me too." Georgiana peered beyond Charlotte, searching for her friend's companion. "Are you here with Lord Trevelyan?" "I am. He's over there." Charlotte gestured to a clump of tall bushes. Behind the thick greenery, Georgiana could only vaguely see the dappled form of Charlotte's husband, the Earl of Trevelyan, speaking to another man. "He's talking to a gardener about tree pests. I'm glad you showed up, because I was about to go out of my mind. This is not why one ventures out to Hyde Park at the fashionable hour." Charlotte laughed lightly, not at all annoyed by her husband's eccentricities. "Anyhow, he told me to come to talk to you, and maybe walk with you for a while, because evidently tree pests require quite a bit of discussion." Georgiana waited for a break in the ladies' conversation, then asked, "Would it be all right if Charlotte and I walk for a while, Mamma?" Her mother waved her off. "Of course, dear. Don't be gone too long, though." "We won't," Charlotte promised. Arm in arm, Georgiana and Charlotte strolled away. The early evening was pleasant and warm, the park crowded with people dressed in the height of fashion, who were there to see and be seen. They turned the bend away from the ladies and started along the footpath that ran parallel to Rotten Row, where members of the Haute Ton drove by, showing off their spirited stallions and their fancy phaetons and curricles. Charlotte squeezed her fingers. "The season is almost over," she said quietly. "I imagine you're thrilled." "Ecstatic," Georgiana said. "I am also glad. I cannot wait to get out of London for a spell. It's so filthy this time of year." Georgiana glanced up at the clear blue sky. "Not today." Charlotte sighed. "True, today is beautiful, thanks to the rain this morning, but they are predicting tomorrow will be hot again, and—" She let her voice dwindle. Georgiana well knew what the heat brought to London, putrid air and pestilence. Yet she planned to remain here for the remainder of summer, her days busy helping her father with his business, and her nights, thankfully, finally, peaceful and quiet. "When are you leaving town?" she asked Charlotte. "Next month. We're not returning to Crag's End right away, though," she said. "Finn and I are travelling to Derbyshire to attend Lord and Lady Merrick's house party." "You are?" Georgiana asked in surprise. Charlotte's husband was known far and wide as the most reclusive lord in England. He was the kind of man who would, time after time, choose to converse with a gardener over a group of people from his own class. "How on earth did you convince the Earl to agree to that?" Charlotte laughed softly. "Oh, I quickly learned just how pliable that man is." She rubbed her gloved fingers in front of her. "With only a little effort on my part, he turns into putty in my hands." "What kind of effort?" Georgiana asked. Charlotte just gave her a secretive smile, and suddenly Georgiana was certain her friend was referring to something private and intimate, and heat prickled her cheeks. She cleared her throat. "Well, that sounds very nice. I'm sure you'll have a wonderful time." "I'm sure we will." They passed a couple sitting on a bench and exchanged polite nods with the pair before Charlotte added, "But I think it would be even more fun if you were there." "I wasn't invited," Georgiana said instantly. While some, like Charlotte and the Earl, easily accepted Georgiana and her family into the more venerated aristocratic circles, others shunned them. Her father hadn't been born into his riches, but had worked to amass his great fortune, and was now one of the wealthiest men in England. Many spurned the Milfords because their fortune was new and hard-won, rather than passed down by generations of men who'd long ago raped and pillaged for it. Charlotte squeezed her arm. "I've spoken to Lady Merrick, and she said she'd be pleased to have you. I don't believe I've ever been introduced to Lady Merrick." "I promise you'll adore her," Charlotte said. "Just as I do, and it'll be so much fun. A week or two of leisure in the hottest month of summer, before returning to your toils in the fetid stench of London." She wrinkled her nose. Georgiana tapped her chin. She actually adored London at all times of the year. Its stench smelled like home to her. But then again, so did the crisp smells of cut grass and flowers of the country. Georgiana's love of London didn't mean she didn't like to leave it once in a while, however. She adored holidays, and took them whenever she could. Her wanderlust had led her to being one of the most well-travelled young ladies of her class in England. She'd even been to Canada, a far-away wild place few people of the ton could claim to have visited. "How long will you stay?" she asked Charlotte. "Until the end of August. Finn has to return to London after that." Charlotte shook her head, but a smile lit her eyes. "I cannot believe how busy that man is with all his various projects and partnerships." She nudged Georgiana in the ribs. "He's nearly as busy as you." "The end of summer will be especially busy." Georgiana smiled and told her friend the news. "My sister is coming. We expect her to arrive the last week of August." Charlotte clapped her hands together in delight. "Oh, that's wonderful. Elizabeth mentioned in her last letter that she might be visiting. My goodness, how long has it been?" "Almost 9 years," Georgiana said. 9 years, but it felt like a lifetime. "Is she coming home to stay?" Georgiana hesitated. "I hope so, but I'm not sure. My father refuses to commit one way or the other." She sighed. "But this is her home, after all. Not to mention the United States has declared war on England again. I worry about her safety there." "But she is in Nova Scotia, isn't she? That should be far from the battlefields." "I hope it will be, but one never knows." Georgiana's older sister had been sent to Halifax abruptly when Georgiana was 16 years old, leaving her bereft at the sudden loss of her confidant and best friend. It had been so sudden, so unexpected, but her parents had said they wanted to allow Lizzie to live in an exciting new land with their aunt and uncle, and over time, Georgiana had grown to accept her sister's absence. But 9 years was too long, and certainly Lizzie must be ready to come home to stay. It would be so wonderful to have their family together and whole again. "I hope she will stay," Charlotte said. "But either way, I'd love to see her." "You must come up for a visit." "I will," Charlotte promised. Then she added, "You know, it's also perfect timing for the house party. You can come have a wonderful time with us, then return to London to be with your sister when she arrives." Georgiana cocked an eyebrow. "Will there be any unmarried gentlemen in attendance?" Charlotte grinned. "Enough that your mother will see a few potential future love matches for you and allow you to go. She won't have to know of my secret vow to keep them away from you." "You'd scare the fortune hunters away?" Georgiana batted her lashes at her friend. "You do that for me?" "I promise I will. I'll bare my claws and be so ferocious they won't dare to come within 10 feet of you." Georgiana laughed. "That's very kind of you, but honestly, I'm adept at keeping them away all by myself. Then, between the two of us, we will be certain to repel them." She thought about it. The truth was, once she'd learned Lizzie was coming home, she'd been so excited, she'd been having trouble focusing on her work. A parent-free house party would be an excellent diversion. "I admit I am tempted," Tempted? Murmured a low, masculine voice directly behind them. To do what, pray tell? A few things happened at once. Georgiana turned her head, then jerked back when her gaze encountered the chiselled jaw of the Duke of Desborough, the smooth slope of his nose, the long dark lashes, and the wicked glint in his sapphire eyes. Charlotte gave a delighted laugh, exclaiming, "Ridge!" Meanwhile, Georgiana's heel caught on the edge of the path, and she lurched back, her arms pinwheeling as she tried to recapture her balance. To no avail. She fell, backside first, into a hawthorn bush. With cat-like reflexes, the despicable Duke lunged forward, grasping Georgiana around the waist and pulling her upright, but not before several thorns caught the back of her dress. As she regained her feet, inhaling his fresh scent of rosemary and cloves, the screech of tearing fabric rent the air. Wonderful. Chapter 2. Theophilus St. Clair, the Seventh Duke of Desborough, Theo to his family, Ridge to his friends on account of spending the first 30 years of his life as Lord Ridgemont, and Your Grace to everyone else, held on to Miss Georgiana Milford for a second longer than strictly necessary. He knew she'd regained her footing, but he couldn't help it. She had a tiny waist, one he could almost span with his hands. He looked down at her perfect face and breathed her in, his senses filling with a soft rose perfume. She reminded him of a rose, too, soft and delicate and beautiful and— "You!" she spat. And a shrew. He let go, quelling the urge to tug on the silky blonde lock that curled at her ear. "Oh dear," Charlotte fretted. "Georgiana, your poor dress." Miss Milford twisted to take in the damage her dress had sustained, then groaned. "Forgive me, ladies," Theo said. "I'm sorry to have startled you, though I'm quite certain my footsteps were loud enough to foretell my arrival from quite a distance." Miss Milford's changeable hazel eyes snapped to his, a fierce light glowing in them. "I was focused," the pretty little virago bit out, "on my conversation with my friend." Theo raised a brow. "As I said, apologies." He gave a small, stiff bow. When he rose, Charlotte smiled warmly at him, while the lady standing beside her wore a pinched, surly expression. "I didn't know you were in London, Ridge," Charlotte said. "I just arrived yesterday. I've been busy with—" He stopped abruptly. He had no intention of sharing what had been occupying his time. Not with Miss Milford, of all people, in hearing range. He gave Charlotte a crooked grin. "Well, you know." He shrugged carelessly, though his life of late was anything but careless, and wrapped himself in an air of casual unconcern. "I needed to get away." "Understandable." Charlotte glanced at her scowling friend again. "I don't think we should continue our walk, Georgiana. In fact, you probably shouldn't move at all. I fear your dress will disintegrate into ribbons if you do." Now that was an image Theo could dwell on all night. Georgiana Milford, bare from top to toes, her clothes in tatters at her feet. Oh, yes, he could picture that perfect petite body, rounded softly in all the right places, all that pale, soft, womanly skin to caress. She glared daggers at him. The Milfords hated Theo, and he knew why. The sins of the father, and all that. Not to mention that everything he did seemed to go contrary to their pretentious standards. Their land bordered his ducal estate in Bedfordshire, and they made for unfriendly, unpleasant, and uncompromising neighbours. It was frustrating as hell. Nobody in Bedfordshire had attempted to get to know Theo well enough to realise he was nothing like his father. He tried to demonstrate that, unlike the previous Duke, this Duke of Desborough was going to try to do right by his community. He was making improvements on the land, on his house, and in the village, yet people still whispered about him. They wouldn't meet his eyes. He'd entered the pub in the village one day last month, and every single patron had set their pints down and walked out before he'd said a word. He had grown cold all over. Stiffly, he'd strode out of the place, not looking back. The following day, he'd escaped from Bedfordshire altogether. He just needed to be away from it all. The Milfords were one of the most prominent families in Bedfordshire. For the past 10 months, Georgiana's father had played no small part in Theo's struggle to bring Clairwood Park back to life. Over and over he'd blocked Theo's attempts, sabotaged his relationships, made progress difficult. Why? It was ridiculous and pointless, but evidently Milford wanted to carry on the feud Theo's father had started that should have died along with him. Little had Theo known that he'd been heir not only to a dukedom, but also the Milfords' hatred and vindictiveness. Charlotte, who'd been fretting over Thomas Milford's spawn, turned to him. "I'm sorry to ask this of you, Ridge, but would you mind fetching Mrs. Milford for us? Ask her to summon their carriage, then meet us." She gestured beyond the row of trees to where the carriage and horse traffic was passing. "Just over there?" Theo's heart sank. He knew how that would go, but he would not deny the Countess of Trevelyan anything. He'd do his best. "Of course." As he turned to do as she asked, Charlotte caught his forearm. "Will you call on us this week? Finn would love to see you." "I'd love to see him as well," Theo said. "I'll call at your house tomorrow afternoon." He gave another formal bow and walked away, thoughts of Georgiana Milford swirling in his head. As they were neighbours, albeit unfriendly ones, he'd known her when they were children, but he'd been 6 years older than her, determined to not bestow his attention on any girl, no matter how pretty, and they never spoke face to face. The first time he'd been officially introduced to her was last year, at the ill-fated engagement party of Charlotte and Trevelyan. He'd been struck by her haughty beauty then, and equally struck in the handful of times he'd seen her since. He'd also been surprised by the level of her contempt for him. It was true, thanks to his father, who'd been a cruel, heartless, ill-tempered, and ill-mannered bastard, many people regarded him with contempt. But, thanks to her father's influence, no doubt, whenever she laid eyes on him, her expression dripped with disdain. He often fantasized about how she'd look if he kissed that disdain right off that beautiful face. How she'd look gazing up at him not with hatred, but with desire. That thought was enough to bring his body flaring to life. But, just ahead, there was her mother in the flesh, standing on the path and talking animatedly to a group of other matrons. Gazing upon her made Theo's body temperature plummet to something in the Arctic zone. Straightening his spine, he strode toward the circle. From the corner of her eye, Mrs. Milford saw him. Her hand flailed out, catching the arm of one of the ladies. Theo slowed, then watched, as, one by one, the women turned from him, giving him their backs and closing their ranks. The whole group had given him the cut direct, in a very public setting. Damn, the ton would be buzzing about this tomorrow. Breathing out through his teeth, he stopped in his tracks. He could shoulder into the group to speak to Mrs. Milford, but that would only result in more gossip, and who knew how these ladies might interpret Miss Milford's dress being shedded to ribbons in his depraved presence. He'd have to handle this on his own. He swivelled away from the group and hurried to Hyde Park Corner, where his own carriage was parked, and roused his coachman, who'd been napping under his cap. "Ned, I need to assist a friend in distress. Please drive down Rotten Row and stop the carriage when I signal to you. Then drive her home." "Aye, sir." A few minutes later, he knocked on the carriage's ceiling to let Ned know to stop. He slipped out of the vehicle and walked toward Charlotte and Miss Milford, whose back was pressed against the wide trunk of a walnut tree. They both looked up as he approached, frowning when they saw he was alone. "Where is my mother?" Miss Milford asked. He ground his teeth. "I know you're disappointed to lay eyes on me yet again, Miss Milford, but there's no need to sound so petulant about it." She gasped. "How dare you call me pet—" "I approached your mother as requested, but alas, she gave me the cut direct." He saw the wince cross over her face, though she hid it expertly. "I see. I suppose I might have anticipated that." "A warning might have saved me some measure of embarrassment," he said dryly. "Why on earth would she—" Charlotte began, then stopped, glancing between him and Miss Milford, who looked as tight-lipped as he no doubt did. "Never mind." She rose and brushed off her skirts. "I'll go speak with her. Will you wait here with Miss Milford, Ridge?" With another much louder gasp, Miss Milford grabbed Charlotte's arm, much in the same way her mother had grasped the arm of the woman standing beside her. "Charlotte, no, you mustn't. Someone will see us alone together. They'll think—" Good God! The chit was terrified at the thought of being alone with the Duke of Despots. He blew out an annoyed breath. "Calm yourself, Miss Milford. I wouldn't want you to suffer from an apoplexy, or the lashing tongues of the gossips, on my behalf." He gestured toward his carriage. "My carriage is just over there." Her eyes widened. "Your carriage? I would never—" He cut her off before she could accuse him of attempted debauchery. "My driver will return you home." Miss Milford gulped, then turned to Charlotte, her expression pleading for rescue. Was he really that terrible? Charlotte took Miss Milford's hand and squeezed it soothingly. "Don't worry, Georgiana. I'll accompany you home." She turned to Theo. "I'll return, but in the interim, will you find Finn and tell him what happened? Ask him to inform Mrs. Milford where Georgiana has gone. He's conversing with a gardener beyond the clump of bushes, near to where Mrs. Milford and her friends are." "Of course. My coachman will return you here after you deposit Miss Milford at her house." "Thank you, Ridge. This is very kind of you." He waved his hand dismissively. "Think nothing of it." Miss Milford did not thank him. She gazed at him with narrowed eyes until Charlotte led her away. Good riddance, Theo thought. Still, he watched her hurry, side by side with Charlotte, wincing when he saw 2 long tears down the back of her skirt. Her dress really was in tatters. Just before she disappeared into his carriage, she glanced back over her shoulder at him, the provoking blonde curl at her ear swinging with the motion. The disdain was still present, but there was something else that lit her expression. A flare of interest, perhaps? Something hot burned within him in response, but then the coachman blocked his view as he leaned in so she could tell him the location of her house, and darker thoughts welled up in Theo. His life, his responsibilities, and the bleak endeavour of repairing what his father had ruined. He shouldn't be thinking of how delectable it would be to tame a certain beautiful, spoiled, and disagreeable shrew, but he had a sudden premonition that would not be the last time that particular temptation beckoned. He avoided Mrs. Milford by staying off the path and keeping himself veiled behind bushes, and once he passed the area where the ladies were still gossiping loudly amongst themselves, he found the Earl of Trevelyan. The Earl was talking to a groundskeeper, a dirt-smudged man holding a rake, and speaking to Trevelyan as casually as if they were close friends. Theo laughed to himself as he approached the 2 men. It was so like the Earl, in this place teeming with members of the upper echelons of society, to prefer the company of a gardener. When Trevelyan saw Theo, his face lit up. "Ridge, I didn't know you were in town." It was damn good to see Trevelyan. They'd been friends since they were boys at Westminster School, getting into an assortment of scrapes and general trouble, and he hadn't seen the man for nearly half a year. "I just arrived yesterday. I was
Sample complete. Ready to continue?